Growers who are looking for that secret sauce usually are just missing something from their garden. And to help with that, we bring you the Stash Blend Premium Plant Additive. Stash Blend brings beneficial bacteria, silicon, seaweed, humic acid, and has enough macronutrition to help lower the dosages of your base feed too. Unleash your plant's true potential with Stash Blend Premium Plant Additive. Available at Growers House.
A huge shout out to AC Infinity. They recently released their humidifier. This is an easy top fill system that allows you to adjust the moisture levels from the outside of your tent. It connects to the controller 69, which makes things so much easier to use. You can follow it on your app. You can see it from outside the tent without ever having to step inside. If you head over to acinfinity.com, use promo code THESTASH15, you can save a few dollars off not only the humidifier, but all of their products. And while you're at it, thank them for being a sponsor of today's video.
Boy, it's good to see you. We jumping right
what
into
up,
things.
fellas?
Talking about this little fuzzy thing here, right here. My mic copped out on me.
Mic.
Yeah, it copped out on me like 2 weeks ago, and it's still here because I'm not going to keep a mic arm without a mic in it. And 2 or B, whatever. I'm not paying for a new mic when I got these nice ones right here.
That too.
Yep.
Yeah.
But now I look so impotent.
I was just gonna say, it looks so. Me and Chris look so uniform all of a sudden because I stole his swagger to get a control arm that's down here for my mic because it was up here. It bothered me, and then we have the same Shure mics now. I like. Now I think honestly, I think you're right.
Doing.
When I told you not to get it, now I'm like,
I know. What was my reasoning? Because Chris and Rob have one.
We bought the same cameras now. I got one generation lower just because I got it quicker and I needed it for the video. But at the same time, just inspire each other, boys. It's what it is, man. It's what it is.
Yeah.
There's good sides. There's the light side, the positive sides of things, and there's the dark side. Like me and P can't happen to get the same beard as Chris. Now P went so crazy as to shave it, and maybe I've heard word on the street is that's how it comes back better. So maybe that's what your trick was. Me, I can't sacrifice. This is 32 years of effort.
This is P's attempt to build back better right here, boys and girls.
Build back better. Looking like a young Dakota. Same age Dakota.
I tagged him in Instagram and I was like, just trying to look like my dad. And he asked me if I would have it for Vegas. I said, of course I'm going to have it for Vegas. But by the time this epi drops, I will have already lost it. And people will be like, now we know.
He's just going to go with a soul patch soon and start doing jazz flute. So
yeah, you're going to call me Nick Lachey.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So the dark side, though, there's dark sides of a lot of things. And one thing a lot of us don't talk about, and usually it's the stuff that's subjective. Some has evidence, but some things are subjective or arguable, is the dark side of this plant. And it could be consumption, it could be cultivation, but I really feel a lot of people want to overlook this stuff. There's yings and yangs to everything, man.
Yep. And this is really your calling, right? We want you to stop growing. We want you to stop consuming. This is like an intervention for you. We're going to tell you about all the bad things about it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, we do talk a lot of positives, right? There's so much positive about it. But there's also downsides, and we never really done an episode just talking about the downsides, right? And I know this is going to get probably quite the few comments in the comment section, but I think it's good we have this discussion because with the good, there is bad as well.
Yeah, and I think that we should discuss it. Some of these things are some stats we pulled up for myself. I actually worked on this a while ago for a different episode from the Journal of Research from the Biomed Central. I can link it below this video. It's kind of where I got some of my information from. Some has stats, and then there's just, I think we discuss it and then have our opinion. Or like we mention the data and then we have our opinion, because opinions are opinions. Everybody has them. But there's some things that I feel like they're overlooking in some of these studies. And then there's some things that I feel like they're not calculating in terms of getting up to date with the times. Like people aren't doing these things as much.
Well, and there's going to be a lot of things that are simply just not scientifically backed right now. The consumption of cannabinoids at this level.
That's good. That was cool.
Yeah, Jesse. Huh?
Oh, we could do that. That's science. This is all for educational purposes and discussion.
As if that mattered. But anyways, the consumption that we are doing now is at a rate that has never been seen before. You could argue the 60s, but I would argue that the stuff that we have now is far more expressive in characteristics and cannabinoids and all those characteristics that we're pulling out through modern cultivation. But there's just not enough information or not enough people consuming long term to get a good idea of what are some negative side effects or negative outcomes of consumption. I know I follow this account on X. It's parents opposed to pot, and
that's a decent brand name though.
Parents opposed to pot. The POP, yeah. The thing is, though, is that there is some legitimate information in this. The problem is that it's just ridden with just blatant lies, bias, just garbage propaganda. It's just a bunch of just garbage information, and it kind of taints the legitimate conversation that should be had by all of us when it comes to the negative aspects or the dark side of consuming this plant, because I think we do ourselves an injustice. It's a disservice to ignore the negative outcomes of this plant. Not everybody can consume. Not everybody can consume the same way. And I think that's important for us to look at and kind of analyze. I had a buddy that would smoke and just vomit. I'm like, buddy, you should not.
Who had a seizure multiple times. I don't know what the medical condition of it is, but if she would get too baked, she legitimately would have a seizure. And she's on a bunch of different medications for different mental chemical imbalances that she has. I don't know how to say it, not offensive, but things that she's dealing with. And it's weird. The only thing they can contribute it to is when she consumed, like that. It hit something with it. I don't know what the science is behind that, but it flipped me out the one time. I'm like, was it laced? Like, I was just telling P before this, I had a buddy, used to be a good buddy, passed away recently from a laced party drug, we'll say. And he was out here just trying to, start sweating, doing his thing, but ended up passing away because it was laced with fentanyl, which is horrible. There is an issue of that being a thing too, but I feel like there's some situations where people's endocannabinoid system and the chemicals in their body react negatively to herb. And I've seen it plenty of times where people get more depression, they get super anxious, they'll vomit immediately, they'll have different where's not the right word, but different reactions than those of us who consume regularly.
Yeah, I mean, it impacts the brain, right? And I actually do have some notes here myself. I don't know if you guys heard of Andrew Huberman. He's been on the Joe Rogan podcast a large handful of times. He's a neuroscientist, professor at Stanford University, and he's got this entire podcast on canna. And the brain impact that it has. This also talks about like anxiety and depression and so on and so forth. So I do have some notes here. One of the things you hear about it is short-term memory loss, right? And what he had mentioned is it's due to the reduction in electrical activity in the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain. It impacts your thinking and focus. And it's funny, they break it down still, the science community, they still break it down between sativa and indica. So he had said sativa varieties activate the prefrontal cortex, which is going to increase thinking and narrowly constrained focus to some activity. And it's funny that when he mentioned that, what I thought of is playing Call of Duty. I would take a couple hits before playing Call of Duty, just be super focused and just annihilate everybody,
Yeah.
and then things would wear off, and then all of a sudden I would do terrible the next round,
We're bringing you back, Chris. We're bringing you.
The fact that you
tell me you're on PEDs, you had PEDs in your system when you were playing COD and you weren't with us. Jeez.
You guys wouldn't have been happy. I would have just been beating you every round.
You would have been
We're
with
a
us.
good team.
We are a
Trios,
team.
boy.
Team, okay,
if your comms
All
are good,
duties
if you got
change.
good comms, we're bringing you back. Now you got a kid. It's going to happen.
Mid-game Foods brought to you by Mr. Grow It.
Well, that's a conversation I want to have. I was talking with Tim Welch. He's former MMA fighter, cat's flipping out, and coach for Sugar Sean O'Malley, and about, is herb a performance enhancer? And for some people who do like the Diaz brothers both have severe anxiety, right? So they'll consume for the opposite effect. It's just like if somebody you don't have pain, you take an opiate, it's going to give you a lethargic down feeling, or an upper, depending who you are. As where if you have pain, it's just going to take care of your pain. If you are somebody who deals with severe social anxiety or stress or things like that, it can help you. But then there's those people who have the opposite, where all of a sudden they get that from consuming. They get this weird panic stress. I just had a buddy who left a little bit ago who was telling me he's taking a little tea break because he's like, dude, I get like severe anxiety. Like I'll know someone's coming over and I'll just get stressed out. I don't understand it. And I'm like,
well, there's another thing Andrew Huberman had mentioned. I'm just going to regurgitate his information throughout most of this episode. Give credit where credit is due. So a lot of things I'm saying is really coming from him. But he had mentioned the study on anxiety, in particular chronic users, which they said two or more times per week over time, and 12 months or more, their levels of anxiety increase. They get anxiety relief initially from it, but long-term increases the anxiety. And then why? CB1 receptors binding to THC, and he goes into this long blah, 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 which went over my head, but there is backing to show that, and a study, peer-reviewed data study, showing that, which I thought was just super interesting. And it goes along with depression too. Another one he mentioned was depression increases over time, even if they weren't depressed to begin. You're 4x more likely to have depression with it, which is just, again, he says that there's very controversial, right? Especially to our audience to hear this.
Especially to me.
And I'll have this link in the description to this video where he talks all about it. I think it's like a 4-hour podcast episode that he has, and he breaks it all down. Dude, you got a cat too that looks like mine, huh?
Yeah.
Just traded cats.
His name's Goku, and he's really wanting some attention lately. He sees cats have channels and pages on YouTube and TikTok and stuff. I'm not doing it, man. My kids are like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, dude. Because who would run that? Me. And I'm not doing that. I'm not like, you think he doesn't have thumbs. He can be up here and bother me.
Right.
How are you going to swipe, bro?
For my cat too. Lap cat, man. He's got to be on the lap. Needs the attention.
He's trying to he's literally trying to talk to the mic. But I think this is where, like, for me. Yeah, he's like, where's my homie? Pull up.
He's passed out over there. He's on
my Vegas homie. He's got the dog who'll flip out and attack the camera.
Yep.
See, I think for me, it's and this is again the opinion side of it. So I use it for the polar opposite. Like when I don't consume herb that I like, because it's not just everything. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be the terpene. I'm into something that's hitting more in that gassier or earthy or piney. If it's fruity, like I almost get anxiety from it. Or if it's the lemony stuff, I will get more tense. I notice that I'm a little bit more like alert, which is cool, I guess, but I'm more tense. And I feel like the science eventually, this is my bro science and some of what I've studied, is that the terpenes will determine the indica or sativa effect, so to speak. Similar to like how people will say essential oils, if you believe in that, will be, the lavender will give you the calming and relaxing effect, or XYZ, because that's really how a lot of medications will be, is you can get this effect or this effect or this effect. And for me, if I don't have something that's like heavy in the carfulline and I can never say the word properly, carfulline and myrcene, maybe a little bit of linalool, I do get some anxiety consuming. I'll get stoned. I'll feel lethargic maybe, but I don't feel great, it's almost like unlocking that key for my endocannabinoid system, that if I consume the right stuff, it's going to give me that, how I feel right now. Very relaxed, very euphoric, conversational, like not antisocial, but I can tell the difference when I'm consuming stuff I don't like. I don't want to talk as much. Like it's a little bit of a crutch, but I probably could be on. I mean, I have been on different medications in the past, more recently even, and some things just don't work as well for me. And I think everything is subjective, and that's probably why there's not a blanket statement for not just cultivation, but for consumption of how much you should have, what kind you should have, indica, sativa, THC percentage, because everybody's going to react differently, and some people can. Maybe I feel like anybody can consume it, but in different dosages, different types, different applications. For an edible, for me, I'm going to sleep. Other people are swearing they're having psychedelic experiences. I think it's interesting. And that's a big reason why I'm so like obsessed with this plant, I feel, is how many layers of interpretation or reaction there is to the chemicals in it. It's different.
Yeah, impacts your brain in various ways. You hear about people talking about laziness, right?
Yeah.
But what I think that stems from is apparently there's a general suppression of neural circuits within the so-called basal ganglia and cerebellum. So a couple areas of the brain They're involved in action planning and withholding action. So go, no go, right? So some people are going to feel motivated after they consume and be ready to go, right? Other times they are going to be lazy, not want to do anything, right? So like, I think that's kind of where we're starting to learn about the different parts of the brain that are impacted and how they impact us.
Well, like the couch girl, remember
you
folded
deflated,
up commercial, deflated couch girl.
Yeah. This could
she
be
was on something
old school commercial,
heavy indicas, man.
The thing is
like that, like.
This is the problem, and I'm familiar with the podcast. I'm familiar with not only Huberman on Joe Rogan, but I'm familiar with the podcast in particular, which you're referring. The problem that I take with these studies is the same thing that I said at the beginning of the show, is that to get long-term science on these is going to be very difficult. And then I would ask, who were their samples? What was the demographic of the people that they took to do the tests on? When they say chronic users, are these
like
what was the age demographic? Are these people in their early mid, a high level, a higher age, mid age, younger age, male, female? What's their weight? I think that's important to note as well.
What's their daily life like? What's their intake? Yeah, what are they doing?
These are things. Yeah, what
trauma have they dealt with in their life?
What kind of preconceived predispositions, or what kind of conditions do they have that they don't know? I think this is very important because I would love to sign up. And I'm sure the three of us all together would love to sign up for this, and let's see the impact on the brain. Of course, there's going to be an impact to brain. You're introducing a foreign substance to your body. Your body's going to react to it. Therefore, there's going to be some neurological connection and wave that's going to happen. So, of course, there's going to be some kind of activity in your brain when you consume. Do we know that one particular portion of the brain, the hippocampus, that deals with depression and so on and so, are we also familiar that it also deals with positive aspects of emotion as well? That we could, although it would spike a depressive act here, is it a depressive wavelength here? These are things that I'm very, very curious about when it comes to these tests, because this is the kind of evidence that we have. CHS, Canna hypermesis syndrome, which, depending on who you ask, is an entire falsehood. It's essentially well, in a nutshell, CHS is a negative reaction to consumption of this plant, this substance, that leads to psychosis and other medical ailments. However, further evidence suggests that these individuals all were predisposed with psychosis already, and our plant, or this substance, when consumed, only sped it up or activated it. So you could blame the plant for doing that, which, without the plant, no problem. With the plant, problem. But is it the plant's problem? I wouldn't argue that. I would say it's not. It's the person consuming it that had the adverse effect. But it's still important to understand that there is a dark side to using this substance, and it would be a disservice to ignore the negative side effects of this plant. But I would be very, very cautious about using the term CHS or subscribing to that belief, if that made any sense.
Yeah, and there are positive things about this. And before we move on from talking about the brain, because we got so many other things that we can talk about the dark side of it. But just to highlight a couple positives, it can increase your appetite, which some people need. Right, they're using this as a positive to increase their appetite. It's a high density of CB1 receptors in the hypothalamus that's doing that. Also, pain relief. Pain relief, it says, has to do with really a perpetual shift of focus onto other things. Also, CB1 receptors and neurons of the spinal cord. So these are things that are positive takeaways. It impacts the brain, like we mentioned, but it can be a positive outcome instead of some of the other so-called negative outcomes that we just kind of talked about there. So, yeah, long list of impacts. It has to do with the brain, some of it bad, some of it good. And but there's many other things, man. Dark side of the planet. We're just in one section here. What do we want to move on next to?
Yeah. So maybe in cultivation.
Juicy.
So water consumption. Doesn't matter if you're organic, synthetic, automated, not, or maybe automated, hand water, whatever you want to do, water consumption. So according to the cannabinoid research, we'll say Journal of Cannabinoid Research, link will be in the description on YouTube. Water consumption in California requires twice as much for our plant than it does for maize, soybean, or wheat. And on average, the plant consumes approximately 6 gallons of water per day for the growing season. There's also illegal growers in the area, been known to divert up to 1 billion gallons of water annually for irrigation. Water theft from areas that supposed to not be taken from. So there's sides of it where essentially we're depleting the environment by consistently doing it. Unless you're collecting rainwater and purifying it or recirculating DWC or things like that, it's a little more difficult to say you're not using a ton of water. I mean, people, they'll mix, let's say, nutrients into a container, and if they feed their plants, they'll dump the rest out, just whatever, or let it sit for a while if they use it. But otherwise, a lot of people just dump it, and it's extremely wasteful. And I think that's one side people don't think about, is how much waste, and especially with water, that we have.
Well, the rebuttal is, hey, I'm pouring it down the drain, and it's going right back into the water municipal system, right? And so I'm not wasting anything.
Yeah, and then you're putting pesticides and chemicals in there potentially, and it could lead to a lot of different issues depending on how they do it. Chemicals that leach into groundwater, or end up contaminating soil or surface water. It could definitely be a major issue for human health and animals and our crops. And it just depends on the water purification companies. I mean, if we're trusting them, let's talk to my neighbors in Flint. Let's see how things are doing for water purification for them. We can't trust it. Or people who get the PFAS warnings every other week, living in the country, telling you to boil your water. It's like, it just depends on where you live. And if you got well water, it may be different, but you're still sourcing it from the earth. So I think it's being intelligent about your use and not abusing it, and that's where having the larger soil beds potentially, and you're not having to irrigate as often, or having precision irrigation with automation, that's key. Making sure that you're measuring the amounts of liquid that you're putting in and not wasting it. It's very helpful, things like that. And even maintaining moisture, if you're doing organics, having like Chris does, having the top covered, whether it be with cardboard or you've got cover crops, maintaining that moisture so you don't have to water so frequently.
A mulch layer, yeah. And just to kind of circle back to what you were saying, runoff, particularly outdoors, just expanding on that a little bit, how negative impact it is on our environment. Runoff into lakes and streams, phosphorus, nitrogen causing toxic algae blooms. Well known. It's a problem that we have in several areas of the earth, unfortunately, but that is a dark side for sure.
Well, these nitrogen based things, and we got so many products that essentially aren't good for our earth long term. They're short term gains for your crops. And I think that's the concern that a lot of growers have when you're talking about bottled based nutrients, regardless of what the formula is. And so there's concern of that waste and harmful to the environment, the water, and even the electrical consumption. Like, we've increased in California alone, they make up for about 3% of our 1% use that's measured allegedly as growers for commercial grows, not home grows, commercial grows. But it makes up for 1% of the whole national use of electricity. Is just commercial grow facilities. And a lot of them are using HIDs. And I think that's where there is some places that give you rebates and things if you switch to LED lighting, but it's a big initial expense to do. And unless you have investors and you're not caring about your ROI, it's tough. So you're looking at the footprint of electricity, of water consumption, and potential waste and poisoning of our nature with a lot of things. So there's a lot that comes to it. And that's where, like, we have to take responsibility as the dudes who are on the internet, teach people how to grow, and the masses of people who want to learn, to make sure that we're preaching the proper products and the right things. And if you're using these other random products, how to use them properly and sustainably, as sustainable as you can get.
Yeah, I've heard a metric before. I don't really remember it, but I was talking about the amount of energy we use to grow indoors. And it was an astronomical number. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but somebody was complaining about that being a real negative downside, is growing indoors.
Yeah, well, in Denver, the electrical consumption from 2012 to 2016 increased 36% annually. Just and that was since more people started growing. The bill for in the U.S. for just commercial grows $6 billion annually right now for electrical consumption. Six
Wow.
billion. So the big guys, the powers that be, they're not trying to shut that down. They're going to keep that going. But those of us who are growing, try to get more efficient lights. Try to dial in your grow. Try to do things efficiently. The more precision equipment you have, the more electrical I can't even say it, electrical consumption you have. And I think that's where you have to know what you're using and what is needed and what's not, and what's just glitz and glamour and shiny objects too. That's a big reason using AC Infinity's products, to be able to have them all in the controller, which is powered by the devices, is a great thing, instead of having a big giant controller like other brands I'm not going to say, but that you'd mount on your wall that take a lot of electricity just to control all of your product. So there's a lot of work to it. I think that really, when you're trying to be sustainable in your garden, of course, starting organic, going with LED lights, things like that, and trying to maintain your watering properly, using blue mats. I actually just ordered some for the trip for my plants here because I don't have enough bases, so I ordered those. Hopefully, I'm gonna have to. What, you got a video, Chris, on those?
Nah, just within grow episodes, so nothing dedicated.
Well, I'm gonna have to look something up because I just purchased some. So it's just about trying to make sure everything is done efficiently and as sustainable as possible. You know.
I think it's important too, while you guys are talking about electricity and in the garden, to just mention that, like, safety. You know, one of the dark sides of this plant is that it's not regulated. There is no set SOP on how to construct a well-regulated, organized, efficient, and effective garden. And a lot of people, myself included, spent years just jimmy rigging up some crazy setup with CFLs and extension cables snipped and wired to other extension cables and extended, plugged into power bars that were overused, with more power bars connected to power bars. So yeah, it's important to understand that, you know, without proper regulation and oversight by anyone, whether it's a government or a third party, it's not safe. There's a lot of elements that are going to require you to go outside of your, you know, live outside your means in regards to what you know. And for me, it was my electrical skills. I had no idea about electricity. I didn't know now I understand, you know, what a 110 volt, or it's 110. I don't even know if it's volts or watts. I think it's volts. 110 volt, like your plug-in on your wall, you know, and you need to be able to match that with the amps that are coming from your power box. You have a 10 or a 15 amp breaker, and you can get 35 amp breakers, but you can only plug so much into those before they start flipping off on you. And when they're flipping off, that's a good indicator that you've overloaded it. Don't keep putting more into it. So yeah, that's just something very important. A lot of burnt houses and tents and
fire hazards, man. You really got to be cautious with electrical stuff. We've got an episode on CLtv about that, and we had people in the chat. Be cautious who you read from, but when somebody says they're a full-time electrician or they do XYZ, it's great to take tips from people like that. Not just growers, but electricians. And I've known people who are green-friendly electricians, will say, who had no problem coming in and checking out my setup or rewiring something so it worked for where my tent was located. I want to make sure that you're very cautious with that. Very, very cautious. I know you got a whole list, Chris, but I got one thing on here that I feel like we discussed and touched on, but we didn't fully touch on. What's my cat doing? Go on, go.
Lots of bells going on.
Lots of bells, a lot of whistles.
Ching.
Ching, ching, ching. It's holiday season's coming up. We're trying to get change for the kids. Get out of here. So, is fake or laced product, and that's consumption or cultivation. Now, oddly enough, man, there's of course this HHC stuff. There's hemp. There's Delta 8 or 9, whatever the heck. All these different things. I'm not super familiar, but people are pushing that as actual product and putting distillate on it and pushing it out to people. Or I've heard, and this is allegedly, that people have laced fentanyl in cartridges, and people were like, how are you going to put it in flour? But in cartridges or in pre-rolls where it's on like the distillate. I didn't know that it was something that you could is combustible like that. But
actually, it's not. That's a little misunderstanding. So Strain at Central, I'm going to give a shout out to him. He actually did a video earlier this week that touched on is our plant laced with fentanyl, and it's a really good video. I won't get into it too much. I encourage you to go check it out.
With the dreads, right?
Yep. And
Strange Show, right? Is it Strange Show?
Yeah, Strange Central is different.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm thinking of Strange Show.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. No, shoot. Now you messed me up. Strain Central was, yeah, you're right. I got it backwards.
Different show back in the day. I remember those guys.
Oh, shoot. You doing this for me, Chris? Thank you. I'll continue while you correct me.
Looking it up.
It's Strange Show. Yeah, it's a channel.
Yeah,
Show.
Thank you. And the video did incredible. It's probably it was like 250,000 views in the first 9 hours.
Could educate 250,000 people.
But anyways, fentanyl when combust or when combusted or when lit it loses its effect. According to his video and the science that he presents, and I encourage you all to go check it out.
Could it still kill a person though?
No.
And that's what I would think. Because something like that would light on fire.
The studies that he references in his video.
Wow.
And so this is the scare. Is this propaganda from the media or the powers that be? Just like candy, when you're going to go for trick or treating, you be careful because someone's going to give up a $20 edible to your kid. Yeah,
just like when you were young and Dare said that when you get older, people are just going to offer you drugs. Yeah, that never happened to me. Yeah, for free. But anyways, or no, you were the one talking, not me.
Well, I just think it's something that people are concerned about who are outside of our space, right? It's the ones who hear that their friends consume, like, you got to be careful, dude. You got to get those at a cart. Oh, dude. It's like, okay, what article headline did you read? Because 9 times out of 10, it's a myth, man. And I've never, ever heard of anyone dealing with this, ever.
There are a lot, like, I can't say I've ever seen it, but there are a lot of legitimate dark sides to it, whether or not there are people actually lacing drugs out there. Maybe there are, I don't know. But I do know that, like, there is a debate surrounding our plant and whether or not you can get addicted to it. And, I do believe that addiction is a very real element to our plant for different people. I personally suffer from an addiction, or I have an addictive personality. So I just get addicted to things, and it doesn't even have to be drugs. It could be people, it can be work, it could be routines, it could be just anything. And I know that there are people out there that are heavily reliant upon this plant, and it interferes with their daily life. It interferes with their relationship with their spouse. It interferes with the relationship with their children, with their boss. It does make somebody lazy, and some people. And if you can't identify that when you use, you are prohibiting your ability to be productive. That's an addictions issue, and you should probably consider getting it checked out, because it's a real thing. And I think it's fair to mention when it comes to
it's a hot topic. We should do a whole episode on that and have that in the title. I'm sure that would get a ton of clicks.
You're addicted to weed.
It's pretty split in the community in regards to whether or not it's addictive.
I think anything, and people say people have porn addictions. There's sex addicts. If anything that you cannot figure out a way to get your mind to stop obsessing over, the mind is so powerful, man. It's crazy. It's insane, the amount of stuff that you can physically potentially manifest from your brain. And if you use things as a crutch too long, that's one thing I know with myself that I'm guilty of, is that when I'm stressed out, I'm like, I just need to smoke. And it's like, that's the most cop-out of cop-outs of cop-outs, because what if that's not around? So I'm just going to be all the time. It's like, you got to be able to get through. The mental health is so important. And I think that plays a big factor in adding any substance. I know people who are crazy when they drink versus I'll just be chilling, lovey and goofy. Other people are nuts. And it's like, you got a wire loose, playboy. Something's going on with you.
You can get addicted to almost anything, right? Running.
Literally.
You can get addicted to running. Runner's high. You hear about people saying that. People are addicted to running, right? Is that a bad thing to get addicted to?
Murderers say they got addicted to killing. Serial killers, it became addictive once they did it once. Like, every sort of thing that gives you a dopamine release or a flow in your brain that gives you euphoria or a good feeling can become addictive. And it's the same with anything. And I think that the biggest issue is this is something that we have to, it's the same reason why I try to embody the whole Stone and Successful side, why I don't get all goofy on the internet and do things for clicks, because I'm like, man, we got to represent this different because there's a stigma on us. Like, as goofy as I want to be for a little skit or something, I'm like, it's going to put a bad light on us. And that's where I get bitter when I see other content creators do dumb stuff that are targeting like teenagers and young adults, where I'm like, man, come on, bro. They're already looking at us in a bad light. What are you doing? And I think that that's just what it boils down to, is if there's already an issue, use it properly. If you have a problem that is mentally there, you can't just put a substance in your body like your friend does who's totally fine. It just is what it is, man. Like, I know I've got some screws loose, but I happen to be able to consume a ton of cannabinoids to make me feel better about whatever my issue is lacking inside of my chemical reaction in my brain. But if I had other issues and this was, slowing me down, well, then this is the obvious factor. I have a mental issue. I'm taking a substance. The substance is hindering it even more. It's making it worse. It's just what it's like eating bad food, So you got to slow down on sugar, change up on your carbs. It's not because you just want to, it's because you need a reaction. So you got to change your inputs for better output.
Absolutely. So I think there's one topic here, dark side, which we can't end this episode without talking about, which is people are still getting arrested and prison sentences for this plant. And it's just, we're so fortunate enough to kind of live in an area where it's legal, right? And we're able to openly talk about it. That's not the case for some states across the U.S. That's not the case for some states, for some countries around the world. And the sad part is people are getting arrested for growing the plant, for consuming the plant, having the plant on them.
They get a couple dollars off the plant.
Right, selling the plant. And
like, it's
they're getting
crazy.
Long-term prison sentences, and people are still locked up to this day for small amounts. And I think in some countries, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you guys know, but isn't there like the death sentence or something like that? Or there was,
dude, in Saudi Arabia,
like, yeah, we'll kill you if you're a dealer or whatever. It's like, wow, that's extreme.
There was I forgot, there was a fighter who wasn't that popular, but he said that he's not fighting in Abu Dhabi because how strict it is if you get caught smoking. He's like, nah. Or no, his performer, his musician. He said he's not going to go there if he can't consume. It's like, if you believe that much to you and it's going to ruin it to you, I mean, if legally you get in a ton of trouble, I understand, I get it. But in a sense of like, again, that's hindering your life. This is where like Cat Williams, like, if you got a job and you're doing something, do you, boo-boo. Get yours, But it's like, if you're going to lose potentially $500,000 for a concert because you'd rather smoke, man, grow up. Wait till you get home. You know what I'm saying? It's great. Like, I smoke all the time. Like, I don't think you guys understand. Like, the boys have now that we've met in person. I consume all the time. It's ridiculous. Only when I'm with my kids am I not. But I'm like, almost lighting one up with the next one. It's too much. And even still, if it hindered my life, I can't do it.
Look what happened to Brittany, what's her last name? Grinder,
Spears.
the WNBA player who
Griner.
was headed over in Russia, right? They caught her with a small vape cartridge and she got locked up. And dark side of the plant, some countries, it's just, they'll lock you up for it.
I know, and we don't always have an arm dealer, violent arm dealer to trade up.
America too, yeah.
America does that. Like, what's crazy to me, and we don't have to touch on this too much because it's a very high topic issue or a hot topic button issue, whatever, is that there was such an outcry for this woman who brought an illegal substance to another country and got arrested for it. But this happens on American soil, I'm going to wager, every single day.
Yeah.
And there was no outrage. There's no outrage.
It was just happening in Ohio until they changed their laws. Like,
maybe it's because they don't play basketball. Maybe it's because they don't have a name. Maybe it's because they're insert your reasoning here.
It wasn't politicized.
This happens every day, but it's not until you take your stuff to Russia do you get a big outcry about it. So the biggest impact, negative impact about our plant is being caught with it. That's it. There's obviously
it could ruin
issues.
your life.
It could.
It could literally ruin your life.
It can't, but the penalties and everything associated with it can, and that's the unfortunate side. But no matter what we talked about in regards to the health, the mental, the addiction, the inputs and outputs, this plant affects everybody differently. And, there's people such as like Willie Nelson, who has been using this plant since he was very young, who still uses it today, just in a different form. His lungs can't handle it anymore, so he gets his edibles in. And, there's some for some people and there isn't for others. And I think understanding what you can handle and what your limits are very important. And I think while you navigate your journey through this plant, you're going to find some cultivars, some characteristics are going to speak to you, others won't. And that's okay. And I encourage you to keep trying to find what speaks to you, and don't get discouraged if along the way there's something that you don't like, because I think there will be something that you do like.
This is a very negative episode, but it's an episode I think we had to do. Just big scale. The positives outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. So that's the way I go about it. The way I think about it is this plant has brought so much more positive things in my life in particular than negatives. And we just got to look at the positives and try to change the negatives.
Look what this plant's done for the world.
Right.
It's done a lot. It's brought people from all over the globe together. It's created relationships. Look at the three of us, man, brought to you by this plant. And here we are doing what we've been doing. And I think it's pretty remarkable. So it's, there are dark sides. And as we mentioned, it's important to highlight them, and it's a disservice to ignore them. But with that being said, the more we know, we can act accordingly and use it to the highest optimization.
Said it better than me. Absolutely.
Hey, bud. Well,
I botched my little
you nailed it. You encouraged me, bro. That's what gave it to me.
He gave him the inspiration. He made a remake.
That was great, guys. Well, if you have anything to add to the conversation, as always, we want to hear from you. Add your 2 cents to the comment section below. One of us will check it out, if not all three. And we'd love to hear from you. A special shout out to all of our patrons, guys. If you go over to Patreon, it's from the stash. There'll be a link in the description. You're actually seeing the names scroll across the screen right now because these are our producers. These are the ones that help us produce the show by helping support us with their financial support from behind the show. We are crowdfunded. Co-producers, and we wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for you guys and helping us be crowdfunded, producing free content for the internet. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. So with that being said, it's your boy Rob, Mr. Grow Up, Pigeon 420. We'll see you guys next time. Stay peace.